A young man wakes up. It's just another morning. But this morning, something is different. He's given a ring, an ancient weapon that chooses its wearer, and he's told one thing: fly. Not why, not how, just fly. Within seconds, he's thrown into a world of aliens, cosmic wars, and a threat so dangerous that even the most powerful heroes in the galaxy are afraid to say its name out loud. This is not a normal hero's beginning. This is a warning. Because somewhere out there, something is watching, and it has already decided that this new lantern needs to be destroyed before he even understands what he's become. This is the story of a ring that was never truly his to give away, a legacy being passed down under threat, and an enemy so old and so feared that its name alone stops conversations cold. By the end of this video, you'll understand why some are calling this the darkest warning the Green Lantern universe has ever given us. Every great story about power begins with a question, and this one begins with a young trainee waking up to a reality he never asked for. He is not chosen because he is ready. He is chosen because someone has to be. From his very first moment holding the ring, he is thrown into confusion. He does not know the rules. He does not know the history. He only knows that he has been handed something enormous, something that carries the weight of an entire galaxy's protection, and he has no idea what to do with it. When he is told to simply fly, it sounds almost like a joke, but it is not. It is the first test of trust. The first moment where he must believe in something bigger than his own understanding. This is where the story quietly plants its first seed of tension, because a ring like this does not choose lightly. It chooses when it senses potential, when it senses will, and most importantly, when it senses need. And need implies danger. Somewhere, a threat is already forming, one big enough that the universe itself is preparing new defenders before that threat even reveals its face. As the trainee struggles to understand his new reality, an older, more experienced lantern watches closely. This is not simple mentorship. This is preparation, urgent and deliberate, as if time itself is short. Every lesson given to the newcomer carries a hidden weight, as though the mentor already knows something devastating is coming and is racing against a clock the trainee cannot see. Then comes a moment that shifts the entire tone. During what should be a simple training exercise, strange signals begin appearing, small disturbances that seem harmless at first, but quickly grow into something far more serious. Victims begin surfacing, and the pattern behind their fate points to something not of this world. When the senior lantern voices his suspicion that these events are connected to an alien threat, he is met with disbelief. What proof does he have? None at first. Only a feeling. But feelings from someone who has seen countless galaxies and countless battles are not something to dismiss so easily, and soon that feeling proves to be more than instinct. It becomes a warning ignored at great cost. As the investigation deepens, the tone of the story shifts from cautious curiosity to genuine dread. This is no longer about solving a strange incident. This is about recognizing the earliest signs of an enemy return, one the galaxy has feared for generations. The kind of enemy whose name alone silences a room and turns confident warriors visibly uneasy. And that is exactly what happens when the word manhunters is spoken aloud for the first time. The reaction is immediate. Faces tighten, voices lower. Something ancient and terrifying has entered the conversation, and everyone in the room understands the stakes just changed completely. This single moment reframes everything that came before it. The trainee's clumsy first flight, the quiet unease of his mentor, the eerie disturbances no one could explain, all of it now feels like the opening notes of a much larger, much darker symphony. Because if the manhunters are truly involved, then this is not a simple threat to be handled quietly. This is the beginning of something the galaxy has not faced in a very long time. And no one, not even the most experienced lantern in the room, seems fully prepared for what comes next. To understand why a single word can silence a room full of seasoned warriors, you have to understand what the manhunters actually represent, and why their name has become something closer to a curse than a title. Long before this trainee ever touched a ring, before the current core even existed in its modern form, the galaxy was protected by a different kind of guardian, an army built not on willpower but on cold, calculated logic. These original protectors were designed to be perfect, incapable of fear, incapable of hesitation, incapable of the very flaws that make emotional beings unpredictable. On paper, that sounded like the ultimate defense. In practice, it became one of the greatest catastrophes the universe had ever seen. Because when you strip away emotion entirely, you also strip away mercy, restraint, and judgment. What was left behind was a force that no longer protected life, but simply erased anything it decided was a threat, including the very civilizations it was built to defend. That failure is the reason the ring the trainee now wears exists at all. It is the reason an entire new core was built on will and emotion instead of cold logic. And it is the reason that whenever the word Manhunters resurfaces, it does not sound like an old story being retold. It sounds like a wound being reopened. This context is what makes the earlier scene so unsettling. When the senior lantern insists that the strange victims they are investigating are connected to something alien, he is not simply making a guess pulled from thin air. He is a veteran, someone who has likely encountered echoes of this enemy before, whether through old records, whispered warnings, or first-hand memory. His feeling is not naive intuition. It is trained instinct, sharpened by history that the newer generation has only heard about in passing, if at all. That is exactly why his declaration is met with visible disbelief from those around him. To the newer lanterns, particularly the trainees still learning to simply fly in a straight line, this is an abstract threat, a name from old lessons rather than a living memory. But to the veteran, this is personal. This is the return of something he hoped would never come back. And that emotional gap between generations becomes one of the most powerful undercurrents running through the entire story. The younger lanterns are stepping into a war they do not fully understand, inheriting fear without inheriting full context, forced to trust the instincts of elders who cannot always explain why they are so afraid. As the investigation continues, the discovery becomes harder to deny. The pattern of victims, the strange residue left behind, the way the attacks seem calculated rather than random, all of it begins pointing towards something far more organized than a rogue alien creature acting alone. This is not chaos. This is design. And design implies intention, which means somewhere out there, a mind, or perhaps a collective of minds, has already decided that this corner of the galaxy needs to be dealt with. When the confirmation finally comes, when the threat is named directly as Manhunters, the tone of the story shifts permanently. This is no longer a mystery to be solved. This is a countdown. Because if the Manhunters truly are involved, then their return does not happen quietly. It happens in force. History has shown that when this ancient threat resurfaces, it does not send a lone scout to test the waters. It sends overwhelming numbers, an army built for extermination rather than negotiation. And that single detail transforms every scene that follows into something far more urgent. This explains the sense of controlled panic among the more experienced lanterns once the threat is confirmed. It is not simply that a dangerous enemy has appeared. It is that an entire coordinated force may already be in motion, and the defenders currently in place, including a trainee who is still adjusting to the basic mechanics of flight, are dangerously unprepared for what is coming. This is the moment where the story stops being about individual heroism and starts being about survival on a much larger scale. Because if the Manhunters can imitate any species, if they can walk among ordinary people without detection, then the threat is not confined to open battle. It is hidden in plain sight, embedded in daily life, waiting for the right moment to strike. This single reveal changes the entire emotional atmosphere of the story. Trust becomes fragile. Every unfamiliar face becomes a possible threat. Every quiet moment becomes suspicious, because if this enemy can look like anyone, then safety no longer comes from recognizing danger visually. It comes from constant vigilance, and constant vigilance is exhausting, especially for someone who only just learned how to hold a ring properly. This is where the tension of mentorship becomes even more meaningful. The senior lantern is not simply teaching flight patterns or basic combat. He is trying to prepare someone for a war that may already be underway, a war where the enemy could be standing beside you without your knowledge. Every lesson takes on new weight once this threat is confirmed, because failure here does not simply mean personal embarrassment. It means potential catastrophe on a scale the newer generation has never had to imagine. And this is precisely why the story earns the label of a warning rather than a simple origin story. It is not just introducing a new hero. It is signaling that an old nightmare has returned at the exact moment a new, inexperienced generation is stepping into power. The timing itself feels deliberate, almost designed to test whether this new era of lanterns can rise to meet a threat that once brought the old order to its knees. As this section closes, the pieces are now in place. A trainee thrust into power he barely understands. A mentor haunted by history he refuses to fully explain. a rising body count with no clear pattern until now, and a single word, manhunters, that turns quiet unease into confirmed dread. The stage is set not for a simple battle, but for a reckoning the galaxy has feared for a very long time. Once the word manhunters is spoken and confirmed, the story does something clever. It does not immediately throw the audience into a massive battle. Instead, it pulls the focus inward, toward the tension already quietly building between the people who are supposed to be allies. Because a war against an external threat is only as strong as the unity of those fighting it. And right now, that unity is far from guaranteed. This is where a second, quieter conflict begins to surface, one that has nothing to do with alien armies and everything to do with pride, legacy, and fear of being replaced. A pointed question is asked, one that cuts far deeper than any physical threat discussed so far. Do you resent the man who came before you? It sounds simple, almost like idle conversation, but it is not. It is a question designed to expose a wound that has been quietly festering beneath the surface. The answer that follows is calm on the outside, but loaded with unspoken history. The ring has always belonged to this newer wearer, or so he believes, and the previous holder was simply keeping it warm until the rightful bearer stepped forward. On the surface, this sounds like quiet confidence. Underneath, it sounds like resentment wrapped in careful, controlled language. This single exchange reveals something crucial about the emotional core of the story. This is not just about defending the galaxy from an ancient enemy. It is about identity, about who truly deserves to carry this immense power, and about the uncomfortable tension that exists whenever legacy is passed from one generation to the next, especially when that transition was not entirely voluntary. This tension does not stay hidden for long. It surfaces directly in a conversation between two central figures, one of whom asks the difficult question outright. Does the veteran truly believe this newcomer is simply his replacement, brought in as backup, temporary, and manageable? Or is there something deeper happening, something the veteran has not been willing to admit even to himself? When pressed to say exactly what this newcomer represents, the answer given is short, direct, and heavy with implication. Not a replacement, not backup. Something closer to displacement, the quiet fear that one's role, one's purpose, one's entire identity as a protector is being handed to someone else, whether by choice or by necessity. This admission matters enormously because it reveals that even among the Lanterns, even among those sworn to defend the galaxy without hesitation, there is uncertainty, pride, and quiet fear operating beneath every heroic action. These are not perfect, emotionless defenders